Hello and welcome once again to episode 45 of Code Completion. We are a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name once again is Dimitri, and I'll be your host for this episode, and I'm joined today by my fellow completionist, Ben.
Hey, hey.
And we actually have two special guests on the show today, Andrew Kozlik and Tom Marks. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hi.
So before we get into our interview, it's time for our Indie App Spotlight. Today we're checking out Way by Alex Andrews, an iOS app that teaches you all about music theory. Way is organized into separate courses to teach you about applied music theory so you can take your songwriting skills to the next level. Along with bite-sized video lessons, you get musical examples, interactive exercises, and tracking tools, making it a great companion for anyone interested in music, whether you play an instrument or not. Way costs $9.99 on the iOS App Store for 2 complete courses, with 2 more available as a $4.99 in-app purchase. So please be sure to support Alex by checking it out. And if you are an indie developer, we want to hear from you. Please reach out to us on Twitter at Code Completion via DM so we can spotlight your app in the future as well. So actually, Andrew initially reached out to us for Indie App Spotlight, but since Ben knew him, we thought it would be great to invite him onto the show instead. And he brought along his teammate, Tom. So as I understand, both you and Tom work on an app called Recipe Box together, correct? Mind telling us a bit about it?
Yeah, definitely. So Tom is our iOS person, and I mostly take care of web. He and I have been working on this together for like 2 years, something like that. Recipe Box is an app that was built to store your favorite recipes that you find on the internet. So if you find a blog or a YouTube video or anything like that, you can just click a few buttons and save your recipe to your recipe box.
Nice. And how do you sort of accomplish, like, you're not obviously having to re-enter the whole recipe, right? So how does that, or do you, like, how does, like, the mechanics of how do you get a recipe into the app?
Sure. So there are 2 ways to add a recipe to the app. The first is to import a URL. So you copy the URL and you paste it in the app. We also built a share extension that you can enable on your browser, and you can share it straight to the app, and then the recipe will be parsed and saved to your recipe box. We also offer the way for you to manually enter a recipe. So if you have grandma's favorite fudge recipe or something like that, you can enter it yourself into your app.
Nice. And what was other than maybe like wanting to have a place to put your own recipes, was there kind of another sort of impetus to like get over the hump of this would be fun to build this to like, oh, but no, but we're really going to do this, right? Like I'm sure as a lot of our listeners who build apps and stuff are aware, right? Oftentimes for me, I think of, 1,000 different things to build, and a lot of them don't get built because they just kind of don't make it over the hump of, that would be cool to know, but we should really make this, right? So what was for you and Tom, like, what was the thing that kind of made you decide, let's really make it go at this?
Yeah, I can maybe start and let Tom kind of talk about his end. So for me, my daughter was actually bored right before we started working on Recipe Box, and I wanted something to work on in the downtime during paternity leave. And just something to keep my mind busy and not just dealing with diapers and feedings, right? So I decided to build this recipe parser to see what I could do with it. And I showed it to Tom, and he really liked it. And he said, hey, I'll build the app for this. And then that's kind of how we got started.
Nice.
For me, it was, same thing. Andrew came back from paternity leave. We were working at the same company at the same time. And he was like, hey, I had this really cool idea while I was away. Started building it. Check it out. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. At that time, I was really kind of like rejuvenating my love for cooking. And like this app was just like perfect. It's like a cooking-based app. I can hyper-focus on that outside of work.
Right.
And it gave me the ability to kind of experiment with iOS technologies that work may not have allowed me to build because it just wasn't part of like the workflow, not the workflow, but like the feature set that they wanted to build out at the time. And so, in order to scratch that itch, Recipe Box was like absolutely perfect for me. And
Nice.
and then with the combination of cooking too, I was just all in kind of thing.
Very cool. Yeah, I think that's something that's like often underrated for devs who maybe do want to make something on the side and they're trying to decide what to do. I think like what you just said, Tom, like picking something for one that you're interested in, and then that also maybe scratches like a technological itch that you have that you just aren't able to accomplish in your job because at your day gig maybe they're like, we're not doing recipes, or we're not doing web scraping, or whatever it is that or whatever it is, right? Location services, whatever it might be that it interests you, and so having a side gig kind of, if nothing else, right, it gives you an ability to scratch that itch and understand that technology better, and have some fun, and maybe even parlay that into like skills that you can sort of, represent in like a new job that you might get in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very simple stuff, but it was like, for me, it was to build an iPad app. That was like my primary one. It's like I had an iPad, sorry, but I'd never really taken the time to build the iPad app. And so when RecipeBox came around, I was just like, well, obviously it's going to be iPhone, great, but I could build an iPad app.
Right.
No, since I had a sort of a similar background to it, that I want to work on some back-end technologies and use this as an opportunity to learn some of those. Yeah.
Nice.
And I think it definitely helps when you have someone else that wants to work on this with you. Like you're not going at it solo. And therefore there's a lot more opportunities to just be like, maybe next weekend I'll get started on this, and then next weekend never comes, right?
RecipeBox would not exist if it weren't for Tom. it would have ended up in my pile of things I worked on for a little bit and then stopped, but we were able to really build up on each other's momentum. This 100% would not exist without Tom.
Nice.
So when it just got started, were you iterating on it quickly, or did it start slowly, and then once it got a certain momentum, then it was able to kind of take off?
Yeah, I think we were going pretty quickly. We were working on it nightly for a year and a half or so, right? It took us about 2 months to get to the first version that we released on the App Store.
Yeah,
and then every month or so, we were releasing another version. And we actually had a very stripped down MVP, right? The minimal viable product. We removed a lot of features that you would have thought we should have had at launch, but we really just wanted to get version 1.0 out the door, right? Because it's easy to keep on adding more features and keep on pushing out that launch date, right?
Right. Feature creep is real,
you
right?
You can do updates. Yeah. So just get something out, get it in people's hands. Right. And remarkably, some of the stuff that you were thinking about building may not actually be important to anybody.
Right, yeah. Yeah, customer validation, right? That's super critical because you might think it's important, but then you release it and then your people are like, no, we don't care about that. Right, your customers. And then you're like, oh, well, save the time. I didn't have to make it or didn't have to spend time on it. So you release the MVP, right? You get it out there. You start to iterate on some of the stuff that you hear from your customers to try and sort of hone in on the feature set that you think is most likely to be what people want. So like what is, I think, a really common probably question that developers would have, particularly like mobile developers, is, okay, building and putting on the App Store is a set of steps that I understand how to do, because if I'm a developer, especially if I like do this work for my day job, I've done it for other people, so like I know how to do that part, right? But once the app is in the App Store and it's for sale, you're like, woohoo, right? It's for sale. But as we all know, right, there's 2 million apps in the App Store. Putting the app in the App Store doesn't necessarily mean anything. Like no one will ever potentially see it. So what was your, like, for both of you, like what was the thing once you kind of took a sigh and were like, yes, it's released? How did you approach, like, okay, how are we going to start marketing this? How are we going to start? What are we going to do for ads? How are we going to sort of get people to be aware that RecipeBox is even a thing, right? Like, what were your first steps for going from development and publishing to, like, a business?
Sure. So the first year, we actually didn't charge anything. So we weren't making any money on the first year, right? We were really just trying to build up a user base, and what we wanted was a database of recipes, so we can do some really cool things like recipe recommendations, and we wanted a lot of recipes to be able to do that. So we didn't want to put up any barriers in front of us getting that data.
Right.
A lot of our growth has been organic. We actually don't run ads. Our CPIs are way too high, right? So we're not doing a subscription service right now. It's a one-time IAP. So $4.99 upgrade to the free app.
Okay.
CPIs were like $3, $4, right? It just didn't make sense for us to really go the advertising route. We were actually really surprised by how expensive it was, but I think those are really built for people who have consumables that you're buying, like loot boxes and that sort of thing, right?
Can you explain what CPI is for people?
I'm sorry, that's cost per install. So that's how much money you're going to pay for every ad that converts to somebody installing your app.
Right.
And
so
that's
like
not an invasive thing, right?
If it's $4 and then you get $5 from them as an upgrade, you've only really made $1 on that person because it cost you $4 to even get them as a user, right? So
right, and it's actually going to cost you a lot more than that, right? Because you have to take your conversion rates into consideration. So if you get a 5% conversion rate, where 1 out of every 20 people is purchasing your app, right? You have to spend $100 on ads just to get that one $5 sale. Right. So it's just not worth it, right? But if you've got an average cost per, an average value per customer that's a lot higher than your ads, right? Then it makes a lot more sense to do that. So we've really been focusing on adding the ability for users to share recipes, right? Recipes are inherently shareable. So you cook something, you bring it to a party, and people are like, oh man, give me that recipe, right? So we're trying to find opportunities there where people are sharing recipes to say, hey, here's this recipe, and also go download this app, Recipe Box.
Right.
So has all your organic growth been attributed to that? Did you do anything else like on the web to market yourself in terms of like making sure you're findable on Google and stuff like that? Or has it all just been through word of mouth?
I think we spent $20 on a Facebook ad, and that was it. We did it once, and it was like, no.
And it didn't go very well. Like your returns weren't that great, so you just kind of decided that's not for you.
That's when
this
when
is going to get
really
expensive.
dug into that. Yeah.
Yeah, we had but we're always looking for opportunities for word of mouth, right? Like our users love us. We have a customer support channel, so we have a Zendesk set up, right? So whenever people want to reach out to us with questions or anything like that, we always try to push people to leave a review on the App Store. We'll typically look to see if they're a paid user. If they're not a paid user, then we'll prompt them to say, hey, if you really like this app, you should consider supporting us by purchasing the in-app purchase. And if they're already a paid customer, we'll say, hey, can you go leave us a 5-star review on the App Store?
Nice.
And we've seen that was actually really nice. As the reviews are going up in the App Store, we do see our download numbers go up, right? So we're really trying to push people to do that. We do show a prompt in the app to go and leave a review after a certain number of unique actions, right? So if you say 5 recipes, we assume that you like the app, so we're going to ask you to go and leave a review.
Right.
And that's been really successful for us.
Nice. So with the recipe sharing, right? I mean, I guess the idea there is that you want to provide some value, right, to the person who's sharing it and the person who's receiving the shared recipe. Easy to share for the sender, and then easy to sort of consume and understand for the receiver. But then you throw in that branding and maybe a link and stuff like that to say, hey, if you really like this recipe that your friend shared with you, they're storing their recipes in Recipe Box. You should also do the same thing, right? And it kind of, it's like a Trojan horse almost, right? Where like you're giving them value, but then you're also it's kind of like an ad that hopefully your best customers are like doing for you.
Yeah, we have something we've found that's been really successful for us too is to actually just directly ask our users.
Right.
So instead of trying to like sneak the advertising into something else or anything like, we'll just directly say, hey, if you like this, please share it with your friends. Like we cannot be successful if you don't share this with your friends. So we just really just tell people, hey, if you're enjoying it, right, it's really important that you support us so that we can keep on doing this.
Nice.
Yeah, I think we've pushed out messaging in the past that said something like, we're a team of 3 people, 4 now, and this is the best way to support us to help us grow the app, help us add new features.
Nice. Yeah, I think people respond to the authenticity of that, right? They're just like, oh yeah, okay, this is not some giant like faceless corporation. It's just a couple of people, trying to make something cool.
We've had people reach out to us that have said like, I'm not particularly interested in the paid features, but I'm buying them because I want to support you guys. And so
Nice.
to me, like those are the best days. Like when I get emails and
Yeah.
that from our support thing that people are saying that kind
Yeah.
of stuff, that makes my day. Nothing can go wrong that day.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah, we'll get messages from people who like use the app to prep their Thanksgiving dinners, right? Like that's really cool. Like Recipe Box is part of these really important family events for people, and it's working for them. It's making their lives a little bit easier, and we really love that. We love hearing all the positive feedback. We love hearing the criticisms too. I mean, it's definitely
Right.
how we get better, and we can kind of see what parts of the app maybe aren't working for people, right? I think one of our challenges right now is categorizing recipes. Right, that's
Okay.
probably one of our biggest complaints that we get is that that's not very intuitive. It's not very intuitive for us either, and we built it. So it's something we definitely want to look at improving. And we've brought on Erin Denton as one of our partners, and she's doing design work and going through and really looking at the UX of the app, right, and just figuring out where can we improve these things and
That's
improve
awesome.
these things.
Yeah, there's a lot of temptation as an indie developer to kind of present yourself as a company, and talk with we all the time and be very distant from your users. But that kind of has a downside of people don't treat you as a human being anymore. They treat you as a business, and you get all the related email and hate mail that comes
Yeah.
with it. So sometimes it's a really good idea as an indie developer, like you both have done, to present yourself as a human, as much as possible. Like, hey, it's just us three. We're just three people, and we want to make the best app that we can. And then all of a sudden, people come to a realization that they're talking to other humans across the screen, and generally tend to have a better appreciation for what is going into the app, and why something might not work and how it can actually be fixed. Like you're talking to the people that are going to be fixing it, not some one in between that's going to just hand off the message. Maybe, probably not.
Right.
Yeah, I think when we started, and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but we did kind of present ourselves that way. We had like we used Andrew's uh, dog as like the name of our like, hey, I'm Harley, welcome to Recipe Box, blah blah blah. People were getting really confused by it, and so we kind of dropped that facade. And I feel like ever since we did that, it's been huge improvement, huge improvement. So yeah,
Interesting.
Authenticity has been a really helpful thing for us, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
So
That's cool.
going back to the in-app purchase, how did you decide what should be part of the paid feature set and what should be kept as free? Since you did take a year to decide on this, so I assume a lot of thought went into like which camp certain things would go into, correct?
Yeah, the year wasn't spent so much thinking about pricing and everything. Part of it was actually just getting the confidence to actually start charging, right? Like it's this really weird thing to say, hey, can you give me $5 for this thing that we built, right? Which $5 sounds like such a small amount of money, but there's this weird psychological hump for us to get over to actually start charging people, right? We felt like we wanted to make sure that this was worth charging for, and honestly, we probably waited way too long. The $4.99 was kind of just in line with other apps that are out there, right? We didn't want to go too much higher. We didn't go too much lower. So most apps are running at, in this space, or at least are running at about the $5 mark. Yeah, so we're kind of following their pricing structures there, and we're still trying to figure out that product market fit sort of thing too. We're actually still running experiments now to try to figure out how can we align the feature set that people want against one that people want to actually pay for. So right now we charge for meal planning and being able to create your own grocery lists, but we're finding that a lot of our users don't actually care about those features. So they're not upgrading because they just don't see the value in paying for it, right? They're getting all the functionality they want right now for free. So we're looking in that space right now to figure out how are people actually using the app, and what are some things that people are already doing that we can find a way to enhance or find a way to charge for. So hopefully within the next couple of months, we'll have an update out that's going to have some changes there, and we're hoping revenue to start to kick up.
For me, the one of the hardest parts was imposter syndrome. So that hump that Andrew was talking about a moment ago, like not feeling like I'm a good enough developer to be charging people money to use the code that I've written. That was definitely a huge hurdle for me personally.
And
Charge
what
early.
made you decide to do a one-time fee versus a subscription? I mean, certainly it's the case that lots and lots and lots of apps are going subscription pricing, at least according to Twitter, much to the chagrin of all customers. I don't know if that's actually true, but certainly people often complain about stuff going to subscription. So why $5 once rather than maybe $3 a year or something like that? Have you found it to be have you found your customers to be more receptive to the one-time upgrade than maybe they would if you were asking for monthly or yearly dollars?
Well, we've certainly had people tell us they would not pay a subscription, right? So people will email us and say, hey, if I pay for this, am I getting charged monthly or is it one time, right? If it's monthly, they just don't want to pay that. We've gone back and forth on this pricing model so much. And poor Tom will get messages from me at like 2 a.m. And I'm like, let's do it. Let's not do it. Let's do it. Let's not do it. Right? I'm going back and forth. So we still don't have it perfected, right? I think one of the reasons why we don't do a subscription right now is because we don't have changing content that we're producing, right? So when you're subscribing to us, we don't really have anything that you're subscribing to. Right, so if we were to do things like predictive meal planning, right? So say, I'm going to take your recipes, and then I'm going to create a personalized meal plan just for you, and here you go, right? Based on your recipes, I would consider charging a subscription for that, right? Because you're getting a monthly sort of service from us, right? Right now, it's really your bookmarking links and that sort of thing, right? So I don't feel like the services that we're offering right now are really matching a subscription model. Now, that said, we really do want to get there. So we're kind of having conversations right now about, do we go into a subscription model? Do we just stay free and try to do like some more social features and grow things that way, right? So we're always trying to reevaluating and talking about our pricing model.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think that's really important, right? To like, just because you pick a pricing model doesn't mean that necessarily is going to be the right model for you forever. So I think that's a really good idea to kind of keep reevaluating and go, is it still right? Is this still what we should be doing, or should we be doing something different?
Yeah, and experiment. Like, try different things, right?
Exactly.
We ran a sale a little while ago to see how that would go, right? And that went pretty well. We've talked about just different pricing. Do we charge $4.99? Do we charge $3.99? Right? So you can just run those experiments. We actually went completely paid a little while ago. So right now the app is free in the Right now the app is free to download in the App Store, and it's a $4.99 upgrade. But we actually for a little while just said, okay, it's gonna be $4.99 across the board, right? You just have to pay $5 to download the app. At this point, we had like 6,000 reviews. We had 4.8 stars. So we felt like we had the social proof to be able to say, hey, this is a great app, right? So we flipped it over to paid. We put it, back up on the App Store, and we hit like number 3, number 4 in paid apps in the food.
Wow.
In the food category. Well, you say wow, but it turns out that number 3 or number 4 in the food category really translated to like 8 or 9 sales a day. The volume wasn't there.
Right.
So we actually found more success by making the app free and then getting that long tail conversion down the end after they've actually started using the app, right? So we might get 20, 30, 40 sales a day, right? Just depending on the day right now. We were really surprised by it. I think the thing that we were really more, I don't want to say jaded, but I guess the thing that kind of made me say, sometimes people say that their app is like number 3 in the category, number 2 in the category, right? Yeah. But if you don't have that volume, it doesn't mean anything, right? So a lot of times those are vanity metrics. Right.
And your numbers kind of prove that, right? That like you were number 3 or number 4 in the category in the whole App Store, which probably any normal person would be like, holy crap, that's, you must be rich, right? But then the ranking doesn't necessarily tell you anything about the sales, right? Because like you said, if there's no volume, then you're not getting the sales.
Yeah, we made significantly less revenue doing it that way.
Yeah. Wait till you see the categories on the Mac App Store.
Yeah,
it was surprising. But that's the point, right? Experiment.
Right.
Charge early and try to find that pricing model and try to figure out what works for you, right? Like, I'm much more liberal now about changing prices and trying new things than maybe I was at the start of this, right? Like, we tried this experiment. It didn't work. Try something new.
And do you have any kind of sort of system or process that you use for doing the experiments and kind of doing it in a way that is, scientific to use? I guess it's the best word to use. Just where like you can kind of run the experiment, collect the data, do an analysis to see how it did, right? Like, do you use any tools, or do you have anything like in particular that you're using to manage those experiments, or is it just kind of like I go into App Store Connect, I change the price, we set the date, we just see what happens?
For pricing, no. I think we're really just looking at the revenue, right? We see our sales numbers, and did they go up? Did they go down? Right? And that's really the number that ultimately matters to us right now, right? We're just trying to increase that revenue number. But we do use Firebase events tracking to do a lot of like funnel tracking and things like that, right? So we measure what percentage of users who open the app for the first time successfully authenticate or register, right? That's a really important metric for us, because if somebody opens the app and they can't register, they can't figure out how to get in and actually start using the app, right? That's a long tail sale that we're losing down the end. So if we can increase registration success rates by like 20%, right, that might lead to a 10, 15% revenue increase in 6, 7, 8 months. Right. And so those are the areas of the app right now that we're trying to identify and trying to figure out what are the metrics that we need to put in place so that we can actually start directly affecting revenue with some of these tests.
Nice.
Tom, I feel like I'm talking too long.
Good. No, not at all. I think it's really good that you're open to experimenting with stuff like this. When I had my debut on the App Store since the very early days, my app was $4.99 and it stayed $4.99 for the vast majority of its history, and I was terrified of ever changing that because it could like disastrously impact me in one way or another. So I think it's really good that you have an open mind to trying these different techniques out and to really see what really works and what really doesn't. For my wife's app, for instance, it's food related. It's all about Vietnamese recipes. And we tried, when we just put it out, we tried putting tips, and the tips worked quite well, actually. Like the highest tipped amounts actually made more revenue than the lowest ones. So like having a $10 tip would make way more than many small $1 tips, for instance. And then we tried also moving it to subscriptions, and subscriptions didn't work out at all, despite having a significant amount of downloads to kind of get the app started. So it's always something that like you need to keep trying to see how different things work. And I think it's excellent that you kind of started off with that mentality from the beginning.
Yeah, I feel like
I see Tom laughing.
Yeah, I feel like for me, like to go with what you were saying, Dimitri, is with the subscriptions. I personally have a pretty high barrier before I'm going to be like, I'll subscribe to that. And so I personally, I make that assumption with like everyone else, probably the wrong assumption to make, but I assume that everyone's like me and no one wants to do a subscription unless they have to. And I feel like that's where like our app is like really excelled. It's just like we didn't force anyone to do a subscription, but then also to Andrew's point of like, it does take a long time for us to convert someone eventually. So there is that kind of like front that we have to, we have an expense up front that will hopefully pay off at the back end. And
right.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like where we are right now.
Yeah, I'm over here smiling, and I think Tom is smiling about the same thing, but he's told me about putting tips into the app countless times, and I keep on saying, no, I don't think you'll be able to do that. So, Dimitri, hearing you guys have success with that, after this, I'm going to be like, hey, Tom,
minor success.
Hey, man, it's a little bit at a time that you're just building up, right? So maybe somebody wants to give us some extra money. That'd be great. So I don't know why I'm rejecting
We
that.
have had people reach out to us through our support being like, hey, do you have a tip jar? I want to send you more money. It's like, that's awesome. No, we don't.
Darn.
Only enable it for people who buy the full app, right?
There you go.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
They've already shown they're willing to give you money, so they might give you some more.
Yeah, Fernando's metric for being successful at an app is making your first dollar, right, Fernando?
Yep, that's it for me. If I can get $1, it means it was worth it. No, but but I mean, besides the joke, I think it's really interesting what everyone's saying in the sense that
That first dollar
it doesn't matter
is
how.
life changing.
Yes.
Like it's
Yeah.
so weird. Like
Yeah.
that first sale, you're like, oh wow, this might work, right?
Yeah.
Gives you hope.
Yeah, it really does. You're like, man, like if I could do this 1 million more times, I'll be good to go, right? But like you got one, so now you got 999,000 plus to go. You know.
As long as it's not over 20 years, right? Then you're good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
As long as you're open to charging and really taking those risks and just put yourself out there like that, right? Like charge some money, see what people pay. It's kind of neat. Every once in a while, I'll go to a movie or something. I mean, not now, right? But used to go to a movie. And I would come out of the movie and be like, hey, we just made enough money to like cover that movie and the popcorn. It's pretty cool. And it's truly passive, We were able to outsource some of the more manual day-to-day stuff to my sister, actually, which has been really helpful. So it's become pretty passive for us. Yeah, at least as far as day-to-day operation goes.
Nice.
So you dropped out for a second, but I think I can fill in what happened. We hired Andrew's sister for our support, and that has been extremely helpful. Like it's basically where all of our funds have been going, and it's been phenomenal. Like best decision we've ever made.
Yeah, I was going to ask about
Yeah.
that. Like, what is at this stage that you're in with your app? What is the support load like? And like how were you doing it before, and then like how are you doing it now, where you've actually engaged with like your sister to sort of formally help you get through that?
Do you want to take that one, Tom, or you want me to?
Yeah, sure, I can go. So when it comes to the support, it started off, pretty simple of like, how do I do X in the app? Or, hey, can you add X feature? And, it would be myself and Andrew would take turns every week. We'd be like, okay, you're doing the support this week, and then I'm doing the support next week. And we would kind of like go through those, and we just get the same tickets over and over and over again. And so we ended up coming up with like not really order responses, but like responses that gave us like the meat of the response. And then like we'd fill out like the outside of it with something more personal. And eventually like the apps, we got featured on the App Store as like one of app picks or editors picks or something like that. I can't remember what it's called. And that just saw our user base explode like almost overnight. It just skyrocketed. And after that, it started to become like a real hassle. And it was kind of like we'd get the same tickets of, hey, I want to change my email, or hey, I don't remember my password, or how can I get my other family members onto the same account, or it was very much the same kind of questions over and over again. Andrew did start building out tools that were able to help us to like quickly navigate those problems and solve them quickly. But it became such a detractor from us actually being able to spend time building out new features, and it was just like this total time suck. Like we'd have our 9-to-5 jobs, and at the end of the day, it was just support tickets. And so we weren't able to actually build the app, add the features that people were asking for, because it was just like, we have to respond to these people. Like they're using our app. Let's help them out. We got to support them. And I feel like it was mid-ish last year when Andrew was like, hey, my sister can help out. We'll set aside some of the money that we've been making from the purchases, and we can hire her. We can actually hire her. And it was the absolute best investment. It is an ongoing investment. If we never make a lot of money, that all the money that we're funneling that way is 100% worth it to me. Like I absolutely love it. I'm always talking about it to anyone who will listen. I tell them how much having someone there dedicated to helping with support it's just life changing.
Yeah, something we haven't really talked about is this isn't a full-time thing for us, right? We're spending our evenings doing this. And what Tom said, we were on a rotation, but basically that meant that whoever was on a rotation was not going to be productive for a week. So I would try to get ahead on some web stuff, and then Tom would try to do some iOS stuff, but we weren't able to really work together. Because there were nights where I'd sit down to do some coding and be like, all right, let me check emails real quick. And then boom, it's midnight. And I've done nothing but answer customer support emails, right? It's tough. I mean, it was really slowing down our progress. So we had to make that decision to be like, okay, we've been making a little bit of money. We've got a little bit of savings set up now. Let's go ahead and start reinvesting it back into the business, right? We saw a pain point. We saw that this was taking too much of our time and it was keeping us from being able to build things quickly. So let's go and put a little bit of money there. Let's bring somebody in who happened to be my sister, right? And like, let's get rid of that pain point. She also enjoys doing it. I don't like doing customer support. I'm not like the best customer support person is, right? My sister's very cheery. She like is super enthusiastic. I'm so happy to have her be like the face of our customer face of Recipe Box, you know. Hands down the best decision. And be careful, because once you provide the opportunity for people to provide you feedback, you're going to get feedback. And there's going to be an expectation that you're actually going to support the people that you're offering to support. So just be ready for, you know, the amount of requests that you might get. Especially in the beginning, you might spend 30 minutes of your night working on one person, right? Because you're trying to figure out, okay, this person wants to reset their email. What's really the best way for me to do that? Do I build a tool to do that? Like, do I do this directly in the database, right? Like, there's a lot of things that you have to figure out. So customer support is definitely a lot more time consuming than people really think when they first get started. It was definitely one of the biggest lessons that I learned, at least.
Yep. And for me, I've launched a couple of very small apps that I'm not going to tell anyone about, and like I didn't get any feedback or anything like that because I wasn't prompting for it. And yeah, so to Andrew's point, the moment you ask for it, it comes flooding. But like a lot of it is good because you do get those days where you'll get someone who's just like, I don't have any issues, I don't have any feature requests, I just want to tell you that I love the app. And yeah, it's so rejuvenating to get those emails.
That's great.
Use Zendesk. That's what we use. It's probably more some practical advice, right? We do use Zendesk help centers, right? For the easy things like how do I reset my password, how do I save a recipe, right? Those general FAQ sort of things that people would come up with. We actually built up a help center page, screenshots, all that good stuff. Zendesk offers us the ability to set up macros. So we can do like not auto reply, but it'll auto fill a response to people. So we can like be like, okay, here's the link to how to reset your password, right? And so it really speeds up the process of responding to those people. But it's been a fantastic service. Yeah. Don't be afraid to spend money on your app when you're starting to make money, right? It's really easy in the beginning to be like, okay, I want to try to save as much of this as possible. But it's really important to put the money into, if you really want it to grow, right? It's important to put some money into some of the other things that will help you kind of be a lot more efficient with your time. Especially if you're moonlighting.
Yeah, how is that moonlighting going? Like, would you did you ever consider like, oh, we should like save up 6 months and then just try it out, or was it always like obvious that no, we got to do a 9 to 5 and then spend our evenings on this?
For me, I personally have like an issue with risk, and so jumping into an app like and committing to that like full time 100%, it is an absolute desire and an absolute want that I have, but I have a lot of like hesitations because like I want to make sure that I can cover my mortgage next month, and I want to make sure that I can put food on the table and stuff like that. So it to me like it it's not necessarily about like saving up for 6 months and then like dropping everything you're doing to focus on it. If I had the ability and the like financial support to do that without like going into extreme debt, I would do it in a heartbeat. Like, don't get me wrong, I would absolutely jump and do that. But it's a scary thing. Yeah, I gotta admit, it's a scary thing.
Yeah, I want to go full time more than anything. From the bottom of my heart, I want to do this full time. Wish I'd done it 10 years ago. I've got a daughter now, right? Like she's got a heart condition, so we've got to make sure we got the health insurance and all that stuff in place, right? The level of my responsibilities right now is vastly higher than it was 10 years ago. So I wish I'd done it earlier. That said, we are trying to make the right moves right now so we can eventually go full time with it. Don't tell my job that. But we'll definitely be, we're definitely trying to push that way. And it's actually making us a little bit more strategic about the things that we're working on, right? Like we know that in order to do that, we have to increase revenue. So right now we're only working on features and only working on enhancements that are going to increase our revenue. Everything else is nice to have. But if we really want this to be a full-time thing, then we need to focus on the things that are actually going to bring us enough money that we can do it full-time. So we're making pretty aggressive product decisions and putting some things off on hold that like sound really cool to work on, but maybe don't have direct impact on revenue, right? I really, really, really want to work on our search engine for recipes, right? I think there's a lot of things that we can do there, but I'm having to put it off a little bit while we try to figure out how do we get this product market fit aligned and everything.
Have you considered in those discussions about going full time? Have you considered like taking on investors or doing crowdfunding or in some sort of fashion, like raising capital for you to then use to invest in your business?
Yes. Right now we're still trying to bootstrap, right? Part of it is a stubbornness thing, right? Like I want to make sure that we're owning the majority of what we're building.
Yeah.
That's really important to me, and I think it's important to Tom. I don't want to speak for him, but I think it's important to Tom as well.
No, absolutely.
Part of it is, honestly for me, part of it is imposter syndromes, right? Like even now, like we have revenue coming in, and I'm like, well, why would anybody ever want to invest in us, right?
Right.
I still kind of look at this, but meanwhile, it's like we don't have like we're not making like $100,000 a month or something like that, but we're making like enough where it's like we can prove that we can make money on this, right? If we scaled it, we can make more money. Like it probably would be a good target for somebody who wanted to be like an angel investor or something like that. But it's kind of back into like, just like in the beginning when I was like, why would anybody pay for something that we built? It's like, why would anybody invest in something that we built, right? There probably are people out there who would, and it might be worth having those conversations. I think when we finally get to the point where it's like, we really need to do this full time, but we're not making the revenue, I think we'll start looking at that as more serious of an option. But right now, there's no hurry. But if the right thing came along, sure, we'll talk.
Nice. There are, in addition to like angels and kind of that traditional like VC route, right? There's also crowdfunding, which has really only become available in the last couple of years, and that's because of the changes that were made to U.S. law to allow people who are not accredited investors to be able to invest in companies. Sites like Republic now, so like if you've never seen Republic, it's kind of like Kickstarter, but rather than investing in a product that you're kind of sort of pre-ordering, really you're investing, but you're sort of, the presumption is that at the end you're going to get the product in return. Republic is an example of a platform where it looks actually very similar in its presentation, but you're just straight up giving a company dollars, your dollars, and in exchange you're getting equity in their business, a small amount probably, and they then collect, $100, $500, $1,000 from lots and lots and lots of people rather than collecting $1 million from one person, and the effect is the same. So while you end up in theory in the same place, nobody's like taken a giant chunk of your company because it's lots of little tiny chunks. Another one that's become really popular is, there are several examples and I can only think of one right now, but it's called non-dilutive capital raising, and an example of that is a company called Pipe. They're pretty new, but basically they're actually literally built for companies that already have traction, already have recurring, regular revenue, stuff like that. Particularly if you guys were a SaaS business where if you were doing, month to month or yearly subscriptions, that's even better. But either way, you have revenue, where they will invest in your company, but by it being non-dilutive, what they mean by that is that basically it doesn't dilute your ownership in the company. So it's a way to raise capital without giving away a whole giant chunk of it. I've been really interested in that kind of stuff lately. So I've done like deep dives into some of these things, and it's been really kind of cool to see just in even the last couple of years, the additional ways that you guys could increase your your velocity by injecting some money into your business without necessarily having to go kind of to that sort of very traditional, like, go to some super rich VC and do a pitch and try and get, trade cash for ownership. There are some new and interesting ways to do it too, where that really just weren't even available before.
That's cool. Yeah, we'll definitely check that out.
Yeah.
There's a certain nice thing too about like running a business that does not necessarily have investors in it as well. Not just from like an ownership point of view, but just you have a business that's generating reoccurring revenue to pay you to continue doing what you love, right? And that is something that seems like it's getting rarer and rarer in the technology space, but is kept alive through indie developers. Like the only businesses that keep doing this are indie developers that don't necessarily grow to dozens upon dozens of people. Like sometimes you just don't need that if what you're generating is enough to keep you doing what you're doing, right?
Yeah, I think part of our thing right now too is I don't necessarily know that our ambition aligns with what an investor would be looking for, right?
Yeah.
So usually it's going to be like, we want this to turn into a $100 million, billion-dollar business or whatever, right? When you read a lot, you kind of read a lot about people disparaging these sort of lifestyle business, right? But a lifestyle business is basically exactly what I want to build, right? Like I'm not looking to conquer the world, right? I don't want all the pressure of coming with running a 60, 70, $80 million company, right? If I can make enough money to cover the mortgage, keep my family fed, and have more time to spend with them, that's ultimately my goal, right?
Yeah.
Running a company that big or with that much revenue is just own set of challenges that I don't know if I'm really built for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
a lot of soul searching when you're in this spot.
Yeah. When we were first starting out, we would go to lunch when we were working together at the other company, and we'd just be sitting there joking about not joking, but like daydreaming about wouldn't it be amazing that if all we did was just work on Recipe Box a few hours a week, kind of push out new releases and stuff like that, and we were getting enough revenue to pay for our mortgage. That was like our goal. It was just like, let's just get the mortgages paid for, because like that's a huge chunk of like your just 9 to 5 wages, honestly. And so I to me at least, that's kind of like my current goal of like, let's get our revenue up to that point, and then once we hit that point, let's think about what's next. I feel like having that kind of like shorter term, potentially more reasonable financial goal, is helpful. I don't know.
Yeah, and we've got an actual goal set right now. So the first one we're trying to hit, right? I'll talk openly about it, like whatever. So the first revenue goal that we're trying to hit right now is like $5,000 a month, right? So we want to be able to just consistently be hitting $5,000 a month. Ultimately, I think we want to hit about $30,000 a month. So if we can hit $30,000 a month, that's about where I'll be like, okay, I feel comfortable stopping and doing this full time, right? That's based on our ownership percentages and how everything would be distributed and everything, right? So we have to really hit a lot of revenue to be able to hit those numbers, right? We're not there yet, but it does feel like we're starting to make the right decisions and start trending up, right? We've got an Android app on the way. We're starting to expand our website a little bit more, right? So I think we have a lot of opportunities there to open up other revenue channels. We're working on figuring out ways to get sponsored content, right? So we're trying to work with companies who sell food products, so spices, basically things people use when they cook, right? And so we can say, hey, we'll let you put sponsored recipes into the app that people can save to give you brand exposure for X amount per month, right? Whatever that amount is. Right. So we have a couple of people we're talking to about that. I'm really excited about that as like a potential revenue model. So we're just trying to drive those numbers up right now.
Nice. Have you thought about like I feel like this is something kind of similar to that idea, which is to dig into like some social media, like not necessarily an ad, but more like getting influencers who might be in maybe like the cooking space or something, to talk about Recipe Box on their TikTok or on Instagram or that kind of thing. Have you thought about sort of approaching marketing in that kind of like sponsored content way rather than like just a regular old ad.
Yeah, the problem is you're running the same problems we were talking to earlier about CPIs, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, like, you have to be able to make enough money to make those things, or to justify the cost of those things.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Somebody charges us $10,000 or whatever for a month of
Right.
revenue, right?
Yeah.
I've got to get a lot of people. That influencer better be very influential.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So it's just the paid routes just aren't working for us right now. That said, down the line, maybe, right? If we switch to a monthly fee and everything like that, then that might open some more options. But for right now, it's just not right for us.
And to jump back to what you said about Android and the web, what did you have any kind of like metrics or any kind of KPIs or anything that you use to kind of help decide, okay, we have our iOS app, when and how are we going to expand to Android, and then like when and how are we going to maybe fill out our web presence to be more, to have more feature parity than maybe what it had at the beginning? Like, how did you make those sort of business level decisions about when to do it?
Sure. So we got a lot of support emails of people asking for an Android app. That was kind of like our big deciding factor of, okay, we should build an Android app. Because it was pretty intense. It was like every, I want to say at least bare minimum once a week, we were having a few people reaching out to us, being like, hey, where's an Android app that my kids can download, or my wife can download, or my husband can download, stuff like that. And so it's kind of like understanding that, yes, there are very mixed technology households. Not everyone's going to align with like Apple or Google or somewhere in between there. It's completely mixed, and so being able to support all users within a single house, I think that was like one of our big goals for at least the Android app.
Yeah, and we want to expand beyond a primarily US audience, right? And Android's still, the dominating platform in other places in the world. So by making the Android app available, right, like let's just go into some of those other markets, especially emerging markets like India and China and areas like that. So I think ultimately, if we want to drive up revenue, right, we just got to get this in the hands of more people. We're kind of locked by how much advertising we can do, right, which we talked about a little bit. So we really had to figure out what are some other channels where we can get growth without having to pay for ads. And for us, it's let's open up a whole new platform where people can use the app, and we can try to grab users from there.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that's kind of its own challenges, right?
Have you considered taking a look at Mac Catalyst as well? Perhaps a Mac app could be great for editing or categorization.
I have that on my computer. It is not. I cannot.
Your
really
sneak preview.
It is. Oh, it is so buggy. Not Mac Catalyst itself, but like the app. Like I've literally got it enough. I made enough changes in my fixes within the code base for it to launch. And that's kind of where I was like, there's a lot of work I have to do here. A lot of the paradigms that we have in the app just don't translate across to the Mac at all. And so it's like, do we release something that just feels wrong? Like when I'm using it just feels wrong. It's like, it shouldn't work like this. And but in order to make it work the way that one would expect it to, that's a whole nother level of challenges and time investment. And is there a user base for it? I don't think we've received any emails of people asking for a Mac app. So that's kind of where it's like, it's a desire. I've been able to muck around in the code to make it work. So I've been able to scratch that itch of, hey, I want to convert my iPad app to a Mac app. But then it's like, okay, now I need to actually seriously invest the time to make it worthy of being released. And I'm not talking about like my imposter syndrome of, oh, I don't think it's worthy of being released. I mean, like, it's not good. It's not a good experience. So it's just like, let's hold off on that, wait for the desire for one app to, for that app to be there. And then, but just focus on making like the iOS and the iPad OS apps just as great as they can be.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I'll leave a link in the show notes, but Steve Troughton-Smith on Twitter has a bunch of threads where he goes through the process of making a good Catalyst Mac app. So if anyone else is in the same boat as you are, Tom, where they want to make something that is respectful of their users and not necessarily just thrown together quickly, then there is a bit of work that needs to be done, but it's also possible where in the previous versions of macOS, it may have felt like it was not really possible to make a good app.
Right.
Yeah, we have to have a lot of honest conversations with ourselves about where we're going to spend our time, right? We've only got a couple hours a night, maybe, to be able to work on something. You need to really make sure you're spending that time on the right things. And
Right.
it does make it harder to take risks on things like building an app, right? Or a Mac app, right? If you don't really know if people are asking for it. Meanwhile, we've got another group of people over here saying like, yeah, we want an Android app. So it's like, okay, cool. Well, at least there's some noise over here saying this is something that's missing in the market. Yeah, we're just constantly making decisions like that about which is the right thing to be working on.
And they're
And we
hard
try to keep
decisions.
track of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
they're
we don't
really hard
always agree.
decisions. Exactly. Yeah. Like, we don't
Yeah,
get into
and
fisticuffs or anything, but
I've got like a foot on Tom anyway. But yeah,
Not over
it's,
Zoom, you don't.
it's true. No, but having that's one of the nice things about having a partner, right? We can talk through those things and having the right partner. Tom and I have had a lot of very honest and frank conversations about the business and things we want to do and hearing each other out. And I feel like he always hears me. I hope he feels like I hear him when we're talking about that stuff, right? But yeah, you don't always have to agree, but it's important to come to a decision and then execute it, right? Don't flip flop. Decide on a decision and just go, and don't wait too long to make decisions, right? Like if you're having a conversation about something, resolve it on that call, right? Resolve it in that conversation. Don't let it drag on, and then not get ended, because then we just make a decision and we just move on to the next thing.
yeah, I think one of the
Yeah.
like to give like a real example was when we were coming to the solution of how do we charge for the app, how do we charge for these new features. I was in that basket of let's do a subscription. That's what Apple's pushing. That's what Google's pushing. Like if you go onto like their developer portals, they are pushing those things really
Oh,
hard.
yeah.
They're like everyone should be doing subscriptions. Rah, rah, rah. And that was my argument. I was just like they're pushing us down this direction. And then, like, so we should do that because we'll get recurring revenue, all that kind of stuff's fun. But then Andrew made the great point of we're not producing things regularly enough. Like, we're not delivering big new features. We're not delivering, like, customized recipes that, we weren't delivering content. That's how it came out. And so when you think about it that way, it's just like, okay, if I'm subscribing to something, would I be angry at that? And you have to check your assumptions. Like it's easy to make an assumption on something, and if you're not open to reviewing that assumption and looking at it under a different light, then you can get stuck in this kind of churn of I'm doing all this great stuff, but nothing's coming from it. And I feel like that was one of the conversations that we had. It was quite deep. It lasted a month. Like we were just going back and
Yeah, that
forth
would
for like
go for a
literally a
while.
month. It was a long while, and I was very passionate about the subscription model. I'm really thankful we didn't do that. I'm really, really thankful we didn't go that road because it wasn't the right choice for us. It's still not the right choice for us today. And so I think being able to take criticism from someone else but don't take it personally. Like that, you have to take the assumption that, I know I just said check your assumptions, but you have to take the assumption that the other person they have the best interest of the thing that you're building together. And it's not, they're not just trying to get more for them. Or, they're not trying to make it about them. It's literally like, this is the product that we're trying to build together. I want to make it the best thing possible. Talk through it like that. Like, I think that's a good assumption, is to just, the assumption of positive intent. For me, I mean, that's always a huge helper when it comes to like those tough decisions.
Yeah.
And really talk through why are you feeling the way you want to feel about this idea, right? To what Tom said, I had very specific concerns about charging a subscription model. I'm actually really happy to hear him say that he feels like that was ultimately the right decision to make, because to this day, I don't know that it was, right? Like, that's probably one of the biggest things or one of the biggest doubts I have in the back of my head is like, man, should we be charging subscription? It's like once a week, probably. I'm thinking about it. And, it's just this thing that everybody says you should charge a subscription, right? You hear it so many times, it really makes you challenge, like, am I making the right decision, right? Do we make the right decision as a group? I don't know. But that was definitely the hardest conversation that we've had as a team, and it did drag on for a little while, but it seems like it's worked out, and we can always change in the future, right? And I think it's what we said also during that time is like, we can always try a subscription. There's some good services out there now that make it a little bit easier to do that, right? So it would definitely, we'd have to make some changes to be able to support that, but, we could ultimately try that. Yeah, but yeah, having a partnership is definitely important, and it's definitely, it's great, but it's got its own challenges.
It's also like, and going back to the checking your own assumptions, it's when you have a partnership, you can build something like prototype something and be like, here, try it. Tell me what you think. I'm not going to tell you anything about it. If you can figure it out and if you can understand how it's going to work, awesome. But that never is the case. It's never the case. It's always like, I thought this was going to do X. And it's like, oh, that's a good point. I need to go add that. Now that I brought that up, I'm trying to think of an example of a time that we've done that. And maybe I can circle back to it later. But yeah, like checking your assumptions. Honestly, that's one of the best things you can do.
And more eyes, right? Just more eyes on the problem is always good, right? Because you're like
you
said, you're going to have a perspective that the other person doesn't have, right? And that's always going to be true. So I actually just worked on a problem today at work with one of my colleagues who's a designer, and I was like, we should do it like X, like this, right? And I was like, these two things should exist, and he was like, but why? And then I explained it to him, and then he's like, yeah, but like, what if we just did it this way? And I was like, oh yeah, that's much better, right? as soon as he added his, he checked my assumption, right? He checked sort of what I thought was the right answer, and I kind of was like, yeah, but isn't this the obvious choice? And then as soon as he explained his perspective, I was like, oh, that is actually better. Like it not only it really wasn't a tweak of what I was doing. It was just a different approach. And I was like, you know what? I agree with you. Let's abandon my idea and go with yours instead, because it's clearly better. And like if it was just me working on it, I probably wouldn't have gotten there. But because of that extra perspective, I was able to to figure that out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the thing with being developers, right? Because I think, are we all developers here? I think we are.
Yes.
You always want to be right.
Yeah, right.
So when the conflict comes up, right, especially when you're arguing with another developer, and people say this in their team sometimes or whatever, right? Like everybody always wants to be the person that's like, okay, cool, I was right. You've really got to check that, right? And come at these conversations with the perspective that like you might not be right, like you might be very, very wrong. Right. You've really got to listen to the person and understand where they're coming from, and not just in your product, but just like in your day-to-day life, right?
Yeah. But
being able to be open to the people's perspective and really listen and actively listen to what they're saying, it's incredibly important.
Yeah, for sure.
On the topic of working on a very small team, just the two of you, and then slowly adding more members, have you just been communicating over iMessage? Do you have a Slack? Do you FaceTime every week? What is your workflow there to kind of keep up with what each of you is doing?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we'd be remiss in saying that we have our designer, Erin. She's been with us now for like a year or so, right? So at this point, I consider us definitely be a team of three, right? Four if you include my sister, right? Erin's been amazing. We actually primarily use iMessage, right? We've got a Slack for doing things like code formatting and things like that, where we maybe really need to talk through some more of the technical things, posting API responses and that sort of thing. But we have a iMessage group called Box Party, right, with our little company logo as it's the icon or whatever. And that's where we really talk through most everything. These poor people have to deal with me sending messages at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 in the morning. I think I'm muted, but it's probably the smart thing to do.
The whole channel's muted.
Yeah. It's worked out great though. Like it's a simple solution, and I can get it on my Mac, I can get it on my phone. Like it's been fine. It's been surprisingly fun.
Tom hasn't seen any of your messages for like the last 6 months because he's just got the whole thing muted.
I don't blame him. I'm probably
Were we
blocked.
still using that iMessage group?
Yeah, I'll send a whole block, and I'll just be like, "I'm sorry." I'm the worst person to text with too, because most people they'll put together their thoughts in like a paragraph, and I just send one sentence at a time. So we should do this. Let's do this. Enter. Let's do this. Enter. And then we do this. Enter. So if you're getting messages from me and you have your sound on, it's just going ding, 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 ding.
Or if you're wearing one of these
Yeah, I'm
watches,
sure
you
it's
get a little
Uh-huh.
massage on the wrist.
That's funny.
So as we tied together this interview, was there anything else that you wanted to share about the development process or running Recipe Box as a company?
Don't tighten
You're ready to
couple
wear a
things.
lot of hats. Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Don't tightly couple your view controllers. Don't tightly couple your models to each other. And there's definitely a lot of lessons one learns when developing an app for production, because once it hits production, you have to support everything, all those past decisions that you've made. Well, not all of them. You can like overwrite them, but it takes time to do that. And yeah, I think you don't necessarily have to like architect it to the nth degree, but have some kind of plan. Like just a high level plan of like, oh, I'm going to have a service that is dedicated to this and only this, and I'm going to have a view model that is for this view, and that's it. And so it makes things testable as well at the same time if you do it that way. That was a mistake I made. I'm trying to correct it currently.
Yeah, be ready to wear a lot of hats, especially at the beginning, right? I mean, we're like product owners, designers, developers, customer service reps, business people, accountants sometimes, right? You have to be prepared for that. You really can't just develop. And having a plan is critically important. We actually wrote a product requirements document before we even began working on anything, where we just through text, like a document, just outlined what is it that we're going to build, right? Like we really laid out a plan and said, okay, this is what the app is going to do. People can register. People can add recipes. How can people add recipes, right? They can import URLs. They can do this. And we didn't get into like the UX, but really just try to capture all of the things that people need to be able to do within the app. And then we looked at that list and said, okay, what of these are critically important to have, especially in our first version? And I think we cut search out. We cut some major features out that we didn't feel like were actually MVP. I think search was the big one that we cut out.
We also cut custom images for custom recipes. We cut that as well. So the only images that you could get were ones that came through the importing process.
You couldn't take a photo of your food or anything like that.
Yeah.
Right, but that was just to get those things out the door. But had we not taken a step back and documented all of that stuff and then had a conversation about it, we might have built the wrong thing, right? Or we might not have ever gotten version 1.0 out the door because we were too focused on building too many features or the wrong features or anything like that, right? So having a plan and being ready to kind of chip in a lot of areas where we might be uncomfortable is critically important for you to get something finished and out the door. Yeah.
Oh,
It's
and
fun though. I love it.
one other note is to just echo what Ben said earlier of get eyes on the whole process.
Yeah.
Just get other people's eyes on the whole process. Like we had people like playing. I had my wife playing with like prototypes, like things that I was just building in. I think I was using Keynote at the time. And it was just like grab little objects, place it here and there, and does it make sense that if you tap on this spot, it goes over here? Like, do those things make sense? And yeah, getting more eyes onto the product early really helps with your iterations.
And making sure that you're clear that you're asking for real feedback. Like, be mean to me. Like, don't attack my personality, but like attack the app, right? Like, I want you to really tell me what's wrong here. Would you use this? oh yeah, maybe I'll do this, whatever. No, would you really use this? No. Why not? XYZ,
Yeah.
right? Um, People generally want to be agreeable, right? They don't want to hurt your feelings, especially when you've been working on something hard. So maybe they would soften some of their feedback, or maybe not give you feedback they otherwise might if they didn't want to like come off as negative or something like that. So if you're going to get feedback from people, make sure that you're explicitly saying like, I want to hear the criticisms. Like I'm okay with doing that, and you as a developer need to be open to those criticisms because it's very hard when you hand somebody something and they're like, this sucks, this it breaks, it doesn't work, or whatever, right? Like I don't like this, because you kind of put your heart and soul into it, and you feel like that app is like an extension of you. And they say I don't like this. It feels like they're saying I don't like you,
Right.
and it's easy to take some of those criticisms personally. It's really important that you don't, right? It's just a product, and being able to listen to those things and take that feedback and then adjust and make changes is great. And understanding which feedback to throw out, right? Some people just don't give good feedback, or they'll give feedback that's like maybe valid for them, but not the bulk of your users, right? So really figure out how to evaluate those things, understand what's good feedback, what's going to work for your customer base, right? It comes over time. It's something we still work on, but it's really important.
Yeah, one of the best sayings, or I guess it's a saying that I was ever told was, "You are not your code." Like ultimately, right there, you are not your code. Don't take it personally. Everyone is wrong some of the time, and yeah, like if something is giving you feedback and it's honest and open feedback, that's the best feedback you're gonna get. So
That's a lot of final thoughts. Sorry.
yeah, sorry about
I'll talk about this stuff all night. Love it.
It's good. No, that's why we wanted you on the show.
It gives us a good excuse to have you back again next time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Would love to do it. Yeah, this has been fun.
So this week's episode of Code Completion is brought to you by Sticky Widgets. Sticky Widgets is the absolute easiest way to put a sticky note on your home screen and edit it quickly. It's so easy, you never need to open the app itself. Add a sticky widget to your home screen through the iOS home screen editor and tap on it to edit. That's about it. Of course, there's tons of customization options as well. Font, color, text size, alignment, all conveniently located in the system's edit widget interface. Add as many sticky widgets as you like or put them in a smart stack. Sticky widgets are digital sticky notes for your phone. Use them however you'd like. Sticky Widgets is a free download on the App Store, and additional font and color options are available for a one-time in-app purchase. Thank you so much to Sticky Widgets for sponsoring Code Completion. Check out Sticky Widgets on the iOS App Store today. So now that we've gone through our interview, it's time for Complete the Code, where we quiz our listeners on your knowledge of Swift, Apple, and all things development. Spencer's out this week, so let's go over last week's Swift UI question again. And if you're listening to the podcast, a reminder that you can check the podcast art or the show notes to follow along. So we have a Swift UI body with an if-else statement checking the value of a property is logged in. If true, we build a text view that says you are logged in, while if it is false, we build a text view that says you must first log in. Why is this Swift UI code not advisable, and how can you fix it? So if you can complete the code, tweet your answers to us with hashtag CompleteTheCode, all one word. The first to get it right will get a shout out on next week's show. And with all that out of the way, it's time for Compiler Error, my favorite segment where I get to test my fellow completionists' knowledge and our guest knowledge about Swift, Apple, and all things development. The rules are simple. 3 of the statements are completely factual and true, but one is an outright lie that I made up, called the compiler error. I go through each one of you one by one to see which one you think is the error and encourage you to think out loud as you consider each option. So today we have a theme, and let me remember to record first. So today we have a theme, and that theme is Apple antitrust cases. Since Apple is constantly in the news, I figured this one is perfect. So let's go through them one by one. So statement number 1, in its first antitrust case, Apple Computer was sued in 1997 by publishing houses for not licensing its macOS system software to run on other compatible hardware at the time. Statement number 2, Apple was sued in 2005 for allegedly operating a music downloading monopoly through iTunes and the iPod music player, preventing Real Networks music from playing on iPods. Statement number 3, just a few months after the original iPhone was released, Apple was sued in a case that lasted until 2019, partly over the fact that the just-released device could not run third-party apps. And statement number 4, After only a year and a half of litigation, Apple was found guilty in a case where there was compelling evidence that they played a central role to eliminate retail competition. So those are our 4 statements for today. Fernando, since you joined in quietly mid-episode, you got to go first.
That's your
Hey.
punishment is for coming in late. Is you gotta go first.
This is interesting. Number 1 sounds plausible. God, I can't remember the exact year when Jobs returned, because when he did, I'm pretty sure one of the first things he did was just like cut the clones. And I'm sure that could have happened. And 97 sounds like around that time. 2005, I actually don't remember if you could play real networks on an iPod or not. That's interesting. The other 2, litigation takes a long time, so I could believe either. I'm gonna say number 2. There's something about real networks that I remember. That's my gut feeling. That's all I have to say.
An excellent choice. So, Andrew, now that you know how the game works, why don't you go ahead?
All right. Pop quiz today, huh?
Yeah.
Every episode.
I feel like number 1 is plausible. I mean, that seems like I've heard of that. So I'm flipping between number 2. I can't tell if number 4 references the recent ruling. I feel like it does. So it's probably between number 2 and number 3. I'm going to go with number 3.
An equally excellent choice.
Just for the record, he's going to say that they're all excellent choices. you get no help there.
I did
I
think
see
that
you
was a
follow me
helpful
around.
first round.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I just have Dimitri follow me around and as I'm picking out groceries, that's an excellent
That's
choice.
an excellent choice.
So, Tom, why don't you go next? And you're welcome to pick the same ones, different ones. You're all against me,
Yeah.
so.
Excellent. You know what? So I've been thinking about it, and I feel like the first one is real, because I feel like that is roughly around the time that Jobs returned, and then took a while for them to come out with the iMac and all that kind of stuff. 2005. The only thing that's kind of tripping me up on number 2 is I personally never heard of real networks. I wasn't really into tech in 2005, so the whole iPod thing, I was literally just like, oh, it's an iPod, it's fancy. That was kind of like my extent of technology understanding at that time. I was like a musician, playing music, that kind of stuff, like absolutely not thinking about tech. Number 3, Apple was sued. That one feels weird to me, I think. Yeah, number 3 feels weird, but it doesn't sound wrong, if that makes sense. So order of elimination, I am going to YOLO and say number 4. I don't recall hearing about Apple having a central role in eliminating retail competition. That sounds strange to me. I mean, I don't think they ever really sued like the Microsoft stores or stuff like that because they kind of copy pasted. But yeah, I'll stick with 4. I'll go with 4.
An excellent choice as well. So, Ben?
All right, so the advantage of going last is that I get to hear everybody's thought process. I don't know that necessarily helps or not because I've definitely won and lost, whether that's true or not. But 97, I'm almost positive is when Jobs came back, and he did immediately put a kibosh on all of the clones, and I could totally see, particularly publishing houses being upset about that and wanting to sue. So that seems very plausible. The whole real networks thing, I know there was beef there. The iPod came out in 2001, I want to say. So at this point, we've been selling iPods for 4 years. they've worked, and at this point they've worked out like selling music through iTunes and getting it on your iPod and all that stuff. So, but I don't know if they ever allowed that kind of thing. So I'm not positive on that. But the third one totally seems plausible that it would take 10 years or 12 years to litigate this thing. And it is true that the iPhone did not release with third-party app support. There was that whole suite solution, which was web apps that didn't work very well. And people are Sue happy. So I again, seems totally plausible. I don't know what that last one is referring to. It could be the most recent one, but retail competition kind of makes me think that it's like something to do specifically with the Apple stores. So, and I don't remember how long there have been Apple stores. I think it goes back to like certainly before the iPhone. I don't think it predates iOS 10, but a long time they've had Apple stores, so it could even be an older case.
I have a question.
So,
is Apple
go ahead.
Is the retail a trick? Is it related to the App Store? Because if it's related to the App Store, then I mean, like anyone paying attention to the news in the last couple of years has just been like,
right,
okay, Fortnite versus Apple kind of thing.
yeah, that could very well be. To me, so for the record, Dimitri's not going to help us at all. So,
there's a lot of crosstalk going on.
You're not going to get an answer to that at all until after we're done. But I think retail means, to me, my thought process is that he put that in there for us to think that it means brick and mortar. But he could also be tricking us. That's the thing, is that Dimitri he's slick and he's devious. And if you've seen this before on our show, like he loves to do weird stuff. So it could,
or at least
really
Ben likes to claim I do. Every single time.
Yeah, it makes it more interesting. So anyway, so it could, to be honest, Tom, it could go either way. Like it either could be that he's focusing on brick and mortar, or he could be trying to throw us off. So I'm gonna go. I feel like one is solid. I'm gonna go number 2 because I have this same sort of feeling that Fernando had about the real networks thing. But that is, as is usually the case when I vote, it's weak. It's a weak argument. I don't have a ton of faith in it.
So we have.
Sorry.
So we have the completionists on number 2, and our guests spread out on 3 and 4. Tom, any final words since you were trying to remember something?
I'm trying to remember if 2005, 2001 to 2005, if Apple was allowing their users to put any MP3 file onto their iPods, or if it had to come through the iTunes store. Because I know they were really fighting all that Napster, torrenting, sharing, all that kind of stuff at the time. And so that's where I'm thinking, like, maybe the real network thing was real? I don't know. I don't know.
We'll find out.
An interesting thought process.
Gonna give us the
So let's start with number 1, since you all agree on number 1. So this was a particular case of Apple falling in decline and publishing houses not wanting to be stuck with Mac hardware that would not work anymore, being entirely dependent on the macOS ecosystem, which is a complete fabrication that I made up. So I am sorry to say that this one is the compiler error. And I'm glad that each of you added your own little details to this as you went.
This is what happens. This is why we all hate this segment.
So I have no clue. Yep. I have no clue if Apple had an antitrust case before 2005 or not. So there may have been one earlier or not, but I completely made this one up. So thank you everyone for falling for that.
Foiled again.
Foiled again. But we can talk about the other ones. So statement number 2. This was a real thing, and it came just on the heels of Real Networks, which had the Real Player. I think Fernando posted a thing in our private chat about that. I think Fernando really likes when he goes first, because then he can just research all of them immediately afterwards and just get it off his anxiety, just move on.
Oh wait, that's not it, but you can check it out. I posted a link in the chat, but that's not what we were talking about. Not really. Sorry, go ahead, Jimmy.
So yeah, just on the heels of them making their Harmony technology work with the iPod, I guess as an app, I don't know, because the iPod you could always put MP3s on that you ripped from CDs, which has always been a thing before the iTunes Music Store. So they had
Pretty
beef
sure
with Apple.
real networks had like a custom format, right? It wasn't
I'm
MP3.
sure, probably. Yeah. It was
Yes,
probably
I
their
think
own
that was
proprietary
it.
thing.
Yes.
And they were suing Apple over only working with fair play stuff and non-ripped, non-DRM'd content, because CDs. So yeah, that is a completely true antitrust case. Sorry, Fernando and Ben, for falling for that one. Number 3, Andrew, you believe this one to be false, but it was unfortunately true that immediately after Apple came out with the iPhone, as of version 1.1.1 or something, someone decided to sue, but it was not only because there were no third-party apps, though that was a part of it. The second thing was because it was locked to AT&T's network. And little by little, this case fell apart. Like AT&T no longer was the sole contractor for not contractor, but provider, there we go.
Yeah.
For iPhones, and then little by little there was like nothing left of the case by 2019, and it was thrown out. So they've been fighting for apps on the App Store since before there was an App Store. And statement number 4, what do you think this case refers to? I'm curious to hear.
This could be something about them removing products from the app stores, from the retail
The Apple stores.
Apple stores. Yeah.
So
Right?
I can add that it is brick and mortar related.
Yes.
And it has nothing to do with apps. This is the ebooks case.
Oh, the ebooks case.
So Apple was there was compelling evidence that Apple was trying to price fix actual books in retail stores, and that's what kind of made them lose the whole thing.
Oh wow.
And yeah, that was an unfortunate time for ebooks because Amazon won in the end.
Which is funny, because literally at the exact same time that there's this alleged collusion happened, which, you know, I don't doubt that it probably did. Amazon was definitely colluding and definitely bringing down the price of ebooks, and also had like a humongous monopoly in that market, and they were like, no, that's fine, but Apple, how dare you?
Yeah. So fun antitrust. We're about to hear a lot more of it in the coming months, as we do every day with new PRs that seem to come out. Yay! So thank you all for playing that. That was fun for me, at least.
It's fun.
It's always the most fun for Dimitri.
So thank you so much, Andrew and Tom, for joining us this week. Is there anything else that you'd like for our audience to know about? Maybe, Tom, your other apps that may or may not remain unnamed?
Nope.
And how can
Go
everyone
download
follow
Recipe Box.
Nice.
Yeah, go download Recipe Box, exactly. And buy the in-app purchase. It's only $5. Like, come on.
Yep.
You spend more doing like various things that you don't even need. So what better way to spend it than to get an excellent app that can save recipes, right?
For sure.
I'm sold.
So how can everyone follow both of you on Twitter?
I am at London Atlas, all one word, all lowercase. I don't really post, I gotta admit. It's something that I'm trying to work on, but every time I finish something, it's like, I want to go to bed instead. So, and then the next morning I've forgotten what I've done. So, I am trying to actively be more, produce more things for Twitter to share, like, oh, I found this is cool. But yeah, right now, not that exciting, I gotta admit.
Yeah, man. At Andrew Kozlik, just one word. I actually deleted Twitter from my phone to try to reduce my screen time, but I am on there way too much on my computer. So definitely reach out. I love talking about indie hackers stuff, people starting their own businesses. I will be actively involved in a conversation around that stuff. So definitely reach out.
That's a good point.
Awesome.
I do respond to messages. I just don't post things willy-nilly.
Yeah, I
Probably
think
not
you need
yours in that
cats
brain
to
anyway.
post things willy-nilly, right? It's like a
You-
good
you're not-
excuse to...
Yeah, you're not going to find out the sandwich that I had for lunch.
But maybe one day if we add social features to
There.
Yes,
Recipe
that's
Box.
very true.
He's
That's
bringing
a
it
good
back.
point.
He's
That's a good
bringing
You'll
it
know
back.
it's when
Beer
it's being
box
developed, right?
sandwich.
You'll know exactly when it's being developed because there's going to be a lot of testing all of a sudden on Tom's account.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I said, you're supposed to be sharing all these recipes.
Tom's tweeting like 20 times a day now. What's going on?
It's all the same recipe. What could it mean?
It's just me tweeting for Tom. Well, thank you guys for having us on the show. This was awesome. This was a lot of fun.
Yes, thank you very much.
So, as always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Code Completion to know when new episodes get released, and feel free to tweet at us if there's ever a topic you'd like for us to dig into. And most importantly, as a small podcast, please be sure to share this with your friends and family who are also interested in any part of the process of app development. It's your support that enables us to continue doing this, and we hope to grow a healthy community around everything we discuss. So once again, I want to give my thanks to Ben, who is at Ferris Guy, that's FerrousGuy on Twitter, and Fernando, who is at From Junior to Senior, that's FromJRTOSR on Twitter, for joining me this week. My name once again is Dimitri. You can find me at Dimitri Buñol, that's DIMITRIBOUNIOL, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye. So what are the rules around like you import a recipe from a website? Like, are you committing like copyright infringement, or like how does that
legal?
work? Yeah.
No. I mean,
It's private,
No.
right? So,
yeah, it's
For personal use.
yeah.
yeah. This is a really important thing to us. It's really important to us that we align ourselves with bloggers and stuff, right? Like we don't want to take traffic from them.
Right.
So if you use our app and you save a recipe, you'll see a stripped down version of it, right? I assume, to me, you saving the recipe is like you printing it, right? Like it's,
Right.
I don't see anything wrong with that. The bloggers might, right? But for our search engine and our website, we always link to the original blog.
Okay.
It's really important to us that we're being seen as a way to drive traffic to these websites.
Right.
So yeah, they might lose the one view on somebody like saving the recipe, right? And so I think there's some stuff there, right? There's definitely some gray area, but we try to push as much traffic as possible to the bloggers, and we might eventually just stop showing those stripped down versions, just depending on how things go. And we have a process where people can actually file a DMCA takedown, so they can just say, "Hey, this is my stuff" or whatever. I just don't want you using it on the app. So I flag it in the database, and it won't show up in search results. It won't do any of that. We also have our website set to do no indexing on the actual recipes.
Okay.
So
So
Google
if you
doesn't
send somebody a link to the
track people
website,
there.
right? We don't want their Google traffic. We don't want any of that.
Right.
So we keep the crawlers off of those pages.
Nice.
Just in the interest of not taking traffic away, right?
Right.
So it's definitely there's definitely some gray area there, but it's like, is it copyright to bookmarks? Like Pocket, there's a lot of apps out there that take content and then show it in a new way to read it, right? Like there's precedent for these apps, but we're not going to fight anybody on it, right? If somebody doesn't want their stuff on their website, we're just like, oh yeah, it's cool, we'll take it down.
Right,
It's all
right.
good,
It was.
People don't
I
just
think it
access
was
the
this
recipes,
year.
but show up.
Right. I think it was this year, around, I want to say March, April-ish, where a new recipe app came out, and they were flogging it to, there were lots of ads. Like I saw it blowing up on like Twitter and Reddit and places like that, and they got into a lot of shit because they were marketing their app as like a way to get rid of all the cruft that recipe bloggers write. Like people, this is going to sound bad, but people don't want to read that stuff. They just want the recipe, but it's through those like diatribes.
But I want to
about
know
their life
why
story.
they fell in love with the pie that they met in France along the river that one time, because it's so important to like contextualizing the flavors.
That and
But
that's actually the copyrighted part of their recipe,
Right.
Because it's a story that belongs to them. Because you, at least to our limited research, you can't copyright a set of instructions. So like you put X amount of ingredients in at these different stages. You can't do that. So that's why they have these like huge diatribes. But the other recipe apps failure was marketing on that, whereas we've done the polar opposite of we want to drive traffic to your website, and we also want to allow the user to be able to just see like the stripped down version once they've chosen to save your recipe after reading it.
We don't advertise that feature at all. We don't tell people, hey, we'll strip out the stuff out, right? Like that's how dedicated we are to make sure that we're like doing everything we can to try to make sure that we're still driving traffic, right? Like
we have a paid
we're
preview.
Really trying to...
Yeah, we have a paid preview feature where you go to Discovery, you tap on one of the recipes that you find, it will load up the original website. But then in the top left-hand corner, there'll be a button, if you've paid for it, called Preview. You can tap on Preview, and then that will show you the stripped-down version. It won't save it for you. You'll just kind of get that quick glimpse, and from there you can save and go and have a look at it later on. But the point that I was trying to make was, we show the original. Like we don't try and block the original creator in any way. We don't try and take their stuff.
That's good.
Yeah, and it's funny because searching recipes still kind of sucks. Like, if you search for, I mean, this exact thing that we're talking about, right? Like, everyone's going to write articles to feed into Google's SEO, because SEOs for Google is hitting the content on the page, but not the recipe, if that makes sense. So they're writing all this content to try and get people to go to their blog, but as an actual recipe search engine, it's not very good. Right. So that's one of the long-term things that we want to do with Recipe Box, is we want to make it a solid recipe search engine. So, and I don't think we're there yet, but we've got some cool things we're starting to do in that space. Like, we want to be able to find blogs for like people of color, right, and try to elevate some of their recipes and get more eyes on those, right? Like, I cook a lot of Indian food. My wife's vegetarian, and like I'll do a search for like chana masala, and one of the top recipes is like chana masala that some like white girl made, and it's like, well, I really want white girl chana masala, right? Like, I want nani chana masala, you know?
Reminds me of the fried rice
what's that
debacle that happened. I forget what his name is. Uncle Roger and the fried rice instructions made by someone who did not know how to cook rice. But they were cooking a very different kind of rice, and there's like a whole bunch of culture that you can miss just by watching that one video. But it's fascinating how, like, the rabbit hole that one video kind of introduces you to, with regard to like that. But it seems like Recipe Box can become an excellent index to a bunch of great recipes to kind of funnel the traffic their way, because essentially it's someone putting the work into to make a recipe, right? It's not just them writing about their experience around having that flavor for the first time. No, they're putting work into building out their blog, and you want to be respectful of that, and it's great that you are. Whereas some other developers may just see it as a pit of content that they can just go ahead and use and not think twice about it.
Right, yeah. I wouldn't want somebody to take my content, and, you know, I get it. But that's why we try to make sure we're making the right decisions. There's definitely a gray area, though. It's the thing the thing I worry about the most with our app being on the App Store is somebody filing enough DMCA takedowns that they take it out of the App Store, right? Like, there was an app called Copy Me to that, and that's exactly what happened to them. And if that were to happen, you know, that wouldn't be good. And it affects our revenue too.
Yeah.
Like, we don't run ads because I don't want interstitial ads that are being prompted based on content that other people wrote and didn't give us licensing to use, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's why we're trying to go the sponsored recipe route, right? Like, instead of just doing like interstitials or whatever.
Or promoting other people's recipes, right?
What's that?
like working directly with the blog authors to promote a recipe of theirs in your app.
Yeah, exactly. Just most of them don't like apps like ours, right? Because they see it as taking traffic away from them, and that's not. It's a really challenging area to be in. It's one of those things that kind of slows down our revenue growth a little bit and everything. So we have to make sure when we do it in a way that it doesn't look like we're trying to take advantage of these bloggers and everything, right? And I've had conversations with some of them, and they haven't always gone well. You know, I mean, they're friendly enough, but they're just like, I don't like what you're doing. You know, it's like, well, that's fine. There's also nothing illegal about it. So,
Right. Yeah.
it's okay. We'll just take your stuff down. It's all good.
So you bring up an interesting memory of mine. So when the App Store just came out, I was about 16, I think. I made a periodic table app called Elements, and I was just collecting all the information. Huh?
I think I downloaded that.
It was the orange icon with a CF. So if that's the one, then thank you.
It sounds familiar. It sounds very familiar.
It's not on the App Store anymore. In fact, it recently broke with iOS 14.6, I think, and I got a ton of support email for an app that was not on the App Store for years.
You think I'll be able to download it again on this guy?
Oh, wow.
It's still on the App Store, I think.
Okay.
Like if it's in your purchase. So
I'll charge this up and I'll have a look.
That's too funny. But going back to what you're saying about like communicating with people, with the blog authors, there's a bunch of YouTube channels that were talking about like science and stuff, and I wanted to simply link to those videos within my app. So I wrote, I thought, nicely worded email, but going back to presenting yourself as a company, not as a 16-year-old, I got a very meanly worded email. It was like, I would never, under any circumstance, like allow my videos to be used in this context, and like I was heartbroken as you can imagine. So when you were saying like it doesn't always go as smoothly when you're trying to make those conversations go through, like I definitely remembered that.
Yeah, I've had some pretty terrible things said about myself, right? Because of this app, but I get it. Like, I mean, ultimately, I don't know. There's a gray area there for sure. It's not that simple. If you're monetizing other people's content, right? There's a problem with that. I get that. If you're trying to show content as being belonging to you, right? Which is probably what the challenge was with your app. Was they wanted people to think it's your Elements app videos, right?
Yeah.
People are very protective of that. But we try to make sure we're upfront about like, putting people's domains on there. We're going to be putting out an update soon that puts up the domain on the exact search result, so overlaid over the images.
Nice.
The images are a big thing. Like we use the images that are set in the meta tags in the open graph image that you would use for like when you're unfurling something in Slack or something like that. I consider that to be fair use. Like that's what that image is there for. So if you're going to link to this site, use this image. The bloggers disagree. Like ultimately,
present yourself more as a Google for recipes than something that's collecting recipes.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to do, right? And we'll get there, but I mean, it's that those images are there for the specific reason that we're using, right? Like exactly that. Like it's
literally meant for preview on other sites, right? That's the whole point.
Right.
In fact,
like,
you specified it here, right here in your
Yeah.
code. It's like, what code? I didn't write any code.
That's why I don't feel guilty about it, because like, if you as a blogger don't understand that, it's not my job to explain that to you. But I'm also not doing anything wrong by using that.
Right.
And so you can think I'm doing something wrong, but like that's just like how Open Graph works. Like that's how unfurling works when you're sharing links. Like you might not understand what that is. If you tell me I don't have permission, I'll take it down. It's all good.
Right.
But yeah, ultimately, I don't see there's any problems with that because that's why it's in the metadata. Take it out of the metadata.